When I was 23, I won a great battle. At that moment, I thought I would live to be 100. Now I know I shall not see 30. Oh. You see, life is strange like that. At one moment, you are at the height of your fame. The next, it all comes crashing down. And when it all ends, and you stand before God, you cannot say, "Oh, but I was told by Odin to do so," or that virtue was not convenient at the time. This will not suffice. Remember that. Welcome to the CM Kozeman channel again, everybody. This is your host, CM Kozeman speaking. You know, for a number of years, I've always lived by a code. And part of that code was not to react to things that happened elsewhere on YouTube. I did not want to lose initiative. And who wants to be a responder anyways? You should rather do your own thing and, be your own person. But last week, at the dawn of the age of Aquarius, that is to say, just towards the end of 2024 and the beginning of the year 2025, something quite drastic and extremely strange happened, and I find myself unable to resist the temptation to at least touch upon it. Yes, everybody, I am talking about the incredibly strange and dark and, let's face it, really sad meltdown of the extremely popular YouTuber WhatIfAltHist's. And a lot of you will probably come into this video expecting me to trash him or just do funny readings of the weirdest and funniest bits, and maybe some of that will take place tonight. But there are other people doing that. Instead, I want to give you a summary of this guy's last few months in late 2024, events which I think may have contributed to his manic meltdown, a review of that meltdown followed by my opinions and maybe a little personal insight into this guy's mind and how it works and where it may have all gone wrong. Anyways, welcome old viewers and new viewers alike. This is a very eccentric and special channel. Make yourselves at home. If you're new, consider subscribing. If you're a subscriber, consider donating to me on Patreon or maybe getting some of my incredible merch. The links are below. Well, let's start with a summary of who this WhatIfAltHist's character is. At the date of recording, the 14th of January 2025, I think anybody who's spent any time online on YouTube or other social media may have an idea, but here at CM Kozeman channel, we do things for posterity. I want these recordings to be enjoyed 10, 20, maybe even 100 years later. And maybe you will share this podcast with your aunt or your grandma or something, and they have no idea who WhatIfAltHist's is. So it can't hurt to be a little comprehensive. WhatIfAltHist's is the internet alias of one Rudyard Lynch, who is a very energetic, creative, and extraordinary character. He approached things from an angle which later became political, but actually his channel grew to enormous sizes based on his quote-unquote alternative history content. If you don't know what alternative history is, it is the, let us say, calculated art of trying to imagine different outcomes for world history. What if the South won the US Civil War? What if Rome never fell? What if World War I was won by the Axis powers, stuff like that. And it's a very actually active and dynamic area of human endeavor. There are actually some very good authors writing alternative history. Just off the top of my mind, I can name Harry Turtledove and S.M. Sterling. That's S-M-S-T-I-R-L-I-N-G and Harry, Turtledove. Go look them up if you're interested in alternative history. They have written some great books. So anyways, on the tail end of this great niche tradition comes Rudyard's YouTube channel. And he has made a lot of YouTube videos commenting on how things may have gone differently in world history. Some of WhatIfAltHist's videos made during this stage are like, what if the Italian army was good in World War II? Top 11 historical misconceptions. What if the Central Powers won World War I? Why is the world crazy now? What if the Turks had won at Vienna? What if the Byzantine Empire survived? 12 insane wars you've never heard of. What if Sweden won the Great Northern War? What if Romans discovered America? So on and so forth. With videos like this, he won enormous popularity. Much more than I, with my meager YouTube channel of nearly 50,000 subscribers, can ever dream about. But that's okay. I personally am not in this for the money game or the numbers game. But he became really popular and, some of these videos, they're not so bad. I mean, without knowing this person, they're not so bad. They're quirky, they're eccentric, they got all these strange maps and bizarre walls of text, but they talk about interesting subjects, And history is, of course, one of those fields which can never be truly divorced from politics. Maybe nothing ever can be truly divorced from politics, but slowly and surely, after winning this incredible popularity, Rudyard began to gravitate towards more political content. So he ventures into other subjects like why communism is a failed religion, are we living in a new Weimar, why modern dating is broken, the coming incel revolution, why is America crazy now, understanding social justice, the future of Europe, we are going to have another Great Depression, and then a salient theme emerges. He's obsessed about a civil war in the United States, especially in the beginning of 2024. There are videos like why the 2024 election will start a civil war, the coming far-right backlash, who will win America's next civil war, the coming incel revolution, now that was a good one, how our world and age will collapse, so on and so forth. And personally, my politics are not right-wing or not very right-wing, but even in these videos, there was kind of a sense of a generational divide. I mean, you found yourself maybe not agreeing with the guy, but he was speaking from the perspective of a Gen Z young person caught in a world that obviously did not care about the younger generations. And, in that kind of a setting, it's natural for someone to be overtaken by doom and gloom and maybe become a bit of a pessimist and maybe even become a bit of a reactionary. I mean, even at this stage, WhatIfAltHist's right-wing stance was comparatively very tame to some of the actual right-wing maniacs out there. Actually, this was the stage at which I became aware of this channel and this character. I came across a debate video between WhatIfAltHist and this egregious personality called Wausch. And during the debate, which I think was about immigration, Wausch pushed this kid to a corner and kind of like got him to spaz out. And it ended with WhatIfAltHist's saying, how many books have you read? How many books have you read? How many books have you read? And Wausch becoming like pushy, and it just ended. It didn't go anywhere. Personally, I will go on record saying two things. Number one, even at his worst, Rudyard, WhatIfAltHist still comes across as a better personality than Wausch, who, despite espousing left-wing politics, turned out to be a real basket case himself and a really disgusting human being in general, and I won't go any deeper into that part of the pond. And number two, this whole debate culture in YouTube, it looks educated, intellectual, people sharing their opinions and trying to find out the best ideas in the marketplace of ideas and shit. But actually, this YouTube debate culture is disgusting. And it's not any different from Jersey Shore or any shitty reality TV you can imagine. And the people it empowers are always sociopaths, reprobates, and people who are actually too dangerous to be allowed to exist. I mean, you also see this in other cases with pieces of human trash like Stephen Bonnell, otherwise known as Destiny, or I don't want to go too deep into that, but yeah. I mean, suffice it to say, even though this Rudyard character was drifting right, I don't think he was any worse than his critics. In fact, he came across as naive, creative, and a genuinely curious person. Perhaps a little quirky, but yeah. I shouldn't laugh, but we will get there. I mean, he sounded like a kind of person I could be friends with, maybe not agree politically, but yeah, I mean, life is like that. And to his credit, Rudyard was talking about some issues which not many other people talked that directly about, especially when it came to the prospects of his generation, Gen Z. One of his videos actually really stayed with me and I genuinely found it interesting, and that's the one talking about the coming psychological Black Death. And in that video, Rudyard spoke about the horrible mental health and drug epidemics sweeping across young people in the United States and the rest of the world. And if you're a young person, things are really, really awful. For a lot of people, the future seems hopeless. The previous generations, especially the boomers, are extremely selfish and cruel. And the ones after them, Gen X and millennials, are just stupid or just caught up in their own past. And yeah, nothing good will come out of them. So yeah, you're just stranded in a doomed world. And that video, I think, encapsulated that feeling really well. One grave mistake Rudyard had throughout all of his videos, even the best ones, I must admit though, was his tendency to mistake the fruits of this evil tree we face today for the roots. He would always end up blaming some non-existent cabal of leftists and overlook the actual causes of the world's maladies, which I think is the technologically mediated collusion between state and private interests. When you're new in politics, you think in terms of left or right, and I guess you must choose one or the other. The right is representative of private enterprise, and the left apparently states for state power and government inefficiency. And that's just a cartoonish straw man way of looking at things. In reality, state power and private enterprises have been acting hand in glove for a number of decades now. I mean, just look at the careers of generals or bureaucrats after they retire. Especially in the US, they sit on the boards of major companies and, everybody pats each other on the back. Corruption is not only rife, but it's actually integrated into the system. And in the last 40 or 50 years, technology has made power projection in a way none of the tyrants of the past could ever imagine. And you saw that during COVID when individual movements were restricted based on technology. Let's say 200 years ago, you wanted to ban a certain very specific act. You couldn't actually do that efficiently. Then with the advent of telegraphs and then telephones and radio, you could transmit orders more rapidly, and slowly, bit by bit, technology made this monstrous organism that's composed of governments and private enterprises. Slowly, technology gave it godlike powers. And now, with the advent of the internet and the smartphone revolution and people's increased addiction to little black screens, now that power is stronger than ever before. You have to realize that politics don't really matter. You could be woke one day, you could be pro-America in quotes the other day, you could be standing for something completely different. It doesn't matter. This power marches on blindly, infiltrating every moment, every act in citizens' lives. They would tax breeding if they could. And if they couldn't do that, maybe they would call it selling air and do it that way instead. If you like my way of thinking, which I think is right, you should read up on this one American philosopher called Lewis Mumford. That's Lewismumford. And he's got books called The Myth of the Machine and The Pentagon of Power, which really lays out this state of affairs in further detail, and it's great reading. So I spun off on another tangent there, but yeah, Rudyard could not see this state of affairs for what it is. In his world, change is only made through choosing the right ideology. That's actually a very American misconception. You have to choose the right way of thinking, like choosing the right product from a supermarket shelf. You get that, and if you do that right, then the world will be great. Just stick to the plan. But of course, in real life, it's not like that. It's all about power and compromises between different centers of power. And when you're really in the thick of it, if you've ever been involved with politics, or if you know actual politicians, hint, I do, you will realize that they're sometimes in quite close contact with the quote-unquote other side. Ideology doesn't matter at all. It's just window dressing. And what matters is who holds on to power, how that power is used, how much you throw away to the public so they don't dethrone you, and you keep on grabbing more and more until death do you apart. Anyways, enough about power and the affairs of the world now. Let's go back to Rudyard, the WhatIfAltHist guy. Also, another grave problem Rudyard had was with the opposite sex. Now, this wasn't very explicit, but if you watched a lot of his stuff and read between the lines or came across some of his wayward tweets, some wild bangers, you kept noticing that he was very quick to slap a feminine label on anything he saw as a problem. Society was going feminine and weak, and when he spoke about women, sometimes it was in that disgusting parlance where he says, I went to a club and all the girls were sevens and shit. He seemed to be unable to grasp that women were human beings like he was, and he could only conceive of women as stereotypes or Stacys or Karens, and I don't know. So I kept noticing that this guy probably has some issues with ladies. It may be a rejection or maybe even something to do with his mother, because when you listen to his podcasts, you always notice that Rudyard was very quick to bring some nice, affable or relatable quote that his father dropped during his childhood, and almost nothing about his mother. Not a single thing. So, there were, in hindsight, these were like canaries in a coal mine, but, you didn't know. You just assumed he was a kind of curious, smart, slightly misguided, excitable, hyperactive young guy with nothing much more than the failings of many young, single 20-something guys you might find in any country of the world. But oh, how were we mistaken? Let's go back to WhatIfAltHist's story. Now, as he drifted further right, Rudyard came into contact with other right-wingers, and he actually found a very welcoming audience. Remember, this guy had hundreds of thousands of subscribers, very close to 1 million. And he drifted closer to certain tech bro, right-wing, pro-Trump guys or circles. I don't know what happened, but towards the end of 2024, we see him making appearances in a number of podcasts. In a channel called Matthew Cox Inside True Crime, he came with an appearance saying the next civil war is happening now. In the Danny Jones podcast, he made an appearance saying the 2025 US civil war is inevitable, and also he spoke about psychedelics, which we will get to see more of. And then in another podcast hosted by somebody called Nick Freitas, he talks about how the young men are going to revolt. He appeared on something called the Mind and Matter podcast, and then another podcast called The Moment of Zen, and a lot of stuff. His audience grew even bigger. And then I'm telling you all this not to kind of give you a WhatIfAltHist's biography, but I think there's a point here which is crucial. And many people overlooked this when considering his incredible meltdown, which happened later. So as this guy became more popular among right-wing groups, he became embroiled in one of the major debates going across the extreme right-wing segment of politics in the United States. And of course, as you know, these right-wingers have very educated and sophisticated arguments and debates, very civilized. It's like the academe at Athens over there, and basically most of them boil down to, do we kill the Jews first, or do we kill the immigrants first, or do we kill the blacks first? If you're European, there's also the added option of killing the Muslims first. That's how sophisticated and erudite these debates are. But as right-wing sentiment came to a tipping point with the election of Donald Trump for president in November 2024, and Israel's brutal war/ethnic cleansing in Gaza, which painted the Jewish people into a corner irrevocably in the United States and all over the world, something happened in WhatIfAltHist's universe. So in the United States, there's a very rapidly rising extreme far-right movement, and one of their points of contention with the rest of right-wingers is what they call the Jewish question. Obviously, these guys are old-fashioned Nazis. They think there's a cabal of Jews behind everything, They think a group of Jews secretly infiltrated American society and caused quote-unquote degeneracy and economic hardships, and this apparently is this big-ass master plan to drive the white race extinct. They think all Jewish people have some sort of a Jew modem in their heads, and they somehow act in unison, together to bring down the white man. This is what they believe. Well, if there is such a Jew modem in every Jew's head, I don't know, because I'm not getting the signal. Well, I'm an ethnic descendant of Jewish people myself. But that's another story. Now, Rudyard, WhatIfAltHist, was under fire from a lot of these Nazi types because he apparently refused to acknowledge the Jewish question. To them, he came across as a kind of soy boy right-winger. They expected him to go there because, this guy was making history content and talking about an upcoming collapse of civilization. So a lot of these hopeful Nazis were waiting for him to jump on their own bandwagon, but, he didn't. This Rudyard character was a more old-fashioned conservative. He was more of the Ronald Reagan stripe, And, well, I'm not going to go into those debates, but he also made himself a lot of right-wing enemies too. There were a few nights on Twitter which I actively watched, and these guys were attacking him from every side. They were calling him names, they were making fun of how he looked, and they were calling him a soy boy and everything under the sun. Some were saying he was a secret Jewish agent, some were saying he was a Jew as if that was a crime. So there was a lot of shit coming our boy's way, But you can't be half an asshole, You can't say, okay, we're just gonna hate a few people. Well, then you end up in situations like this. And I already showed you from his previous experience debating characters like Vosh that despite being combative, this Rudyard character had actually a pretty thin skin, and that's actually okay. That's human, that's forgivable, that's understandable, You got thousands of people insulting you, maybe death threats and stuff like that, that can get under a person's skin, especially if you're young and if you spent all your life online. But yeah, we didn't know how serious this was getting. And if you followed Rudyard closely, you also noticed that he had a tendency for great challenges or great statements and manifestos, and you could kind of sense that he wanted to lead a movement somehow. A case to this point was this one video he posted called A Manifesto for the New Right. Thousands of people are turning towards right-wing politics for a number of different reasons. And, who are you? I'm sorry, but to claim this, you just want to be a leader. You are on an ego trip. There was also another video which may have been taken down called I'm Declaring War on the Internet, where Rudyard said everybody should debate me and I'm just gonna be like in total fight mode right now or whatever, And there were numerous times, again on Twitter, where he would just post a lot of quite incoherent stuff, and then he would say, I was just joking, can't you guys take a joke or something? Or he had a few cases where he was going off Twitter for good now, taking a break from social media. And also in a lot of videos and interviews, he kind of offhand mentioned he was having therapy for reasons and he had suffered trauma, and he kept saying he had PTSD. Oh, little did we know. Now, this whole video so far was a preamble to the event, which we are going to go deeper into now. But before we do, please consider, once again, if you come this far, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Even $1 a month makes a huge difference for me, so please consider putting your money where your ears are. Anyways, now we will talk about the event, which at the time of recording, the 14th of January 2025, is still sending shockwaves across global social media, let us say. Okay, so here is how it began. Shortly before New Year's in 2024, Rudyard posted 3 videos titled The WhatIfAltHist's Story 1, 2, and 3 on the WhatIfAltHist channel. But these were no ordinary videos. They were no mere mortal videos. They had a combined runtime of more than 10 hours. On first sight, you think that, this guy recorded his own autobiography and posted it online. And personally, I'm a big fan of the biography, memoir, and autobiography genre, because I think a well-written autobiography or a well-written memoir can really take us to a different time and place, and there are always great stories in memoirs and biographies. So I jumped right in, and sure enough, at first sight, it seems to be this guy's own biography, and you can really tell, at least in the beginning, that Rudyard really enjoys telling the story. It starts from his own grandparents and his parents and their lives, and it kind of builds up to who this guy is and where he came from. Of course, if you're American, that's kind of important because almost everybody in America is from somewhere else, and everybody has to have a story there. Actually, like, if you give an American a believable story, you can get him or her to do anything. So that sort of thing really matters to Americans, and Rudyard really tackles that well. We learned that his grandfather was an eccentric, his father was an eccentric, his mother was an eccentric and also an abuser. And one thing you notice here is the brazenness with which Rudyard doxes his own father and mother. He just straight up gives their normal given names. Anyone can Google them. He actually gives a name for his grandfather too, and tells us that he wrote a book once and his grandfather was a super conservative Catholic figure. And actually you can search this and find the book that Rudyard's grandfather wrote. So little details like this really immerse you in the WhatIfAltHist's story. You feel like he's telling the truth, And that becomes an issue because you will see. But at least in the first quarter of the WhatIfAltHist's story, you really believe what he's saying. You really find yourself immersed in this life story. And it puts a really human face on this YouTube personality this guy built for himself over the past year. You no longer care about politics, but you just see a curious young boy with a strange, eccentric, and somewhat troubled family trying to be happy in life. And at this point, I even got some hope, saying maybe Rudyard is really maturing and this is gonna be a part in his life where he's gonna maybe distance himself from politics and become a more human-focused, human-oriented historian, starting with his own biography there. But boy, was I wrong. Anyways, he tells about a lot of interesting and nice details. He goes to hike the Appalachian Trail, which is this really nice, picturesque, and kind of challenging walking trail in the eastern United States. And he goes on to walk there, and his grandma says, "Oh, be careful, Rudyard, you're gonna have an accident or some shit." And he says, "How dare you oppress me? I'll walk twice as far because you're just holding me back." And then he goes on the trail and actually drinks unfiltered water and catches parasites. So his dad has to pick him up, and I think he learns a lesson there. Other people have reviewed this particular instance in Rudyard's biography and they laughed at him, but here I'm laughing with him because I personally had similar stories where I was so set on hiking the Lycian Trail in Turkey. And similarly, my family members were saying don't go, it's dangerous, please let us know. And I was like, how dare you hold me back, you fucking cowards. I will not let you know where I am. I'll just disappear, have an adventure, and come back. You people are so cowardly. You are so pusillanimous. You're so blind to the wonders of just normal life. You're trapped in an upper middle class cage of your own making. I was full of rage because they dared voice their concern for my safety. And of course, I had my share of misadventures too. I did not catch parasites and I did not have to be rescued by my dad, but I got lost on a forest trail and found my way down into a highway in a mountain pass at around 1 a.m. And then, because I don't use smartphones, I have a normal phone, I could not see where I was on the map, and I ended up calling a hotel, the number of which I saw on a roadside sign. And the receptionist personally drove over, picked me up, and I had to stay at that hotel. And well, that was my misadventure. All I'm saying is, people, mostly men, but people in general are like that. You can't do things for them all the time, and especially men need to have misadventures. I think actually the recipe of a perfect vacation involves a bit of a misadventure. It's boring to just go to a 5-star hotel and just come back. You actually need to go somewhere, you need to have a quest, and there needs to be some risks in that quest. Maybe you drive somewhere and you run out of gas, or nothing serious, nobody dies, nothing gets broken, you don't get robbed at knife point. But some misadventures really add color to an otherwise boring life. So there. But anyways, back to Rudyard's biography. By the way, everything I'm telling you here is based on what this guy says on these videos. And as you're about to see, there will be plenty of reasons to doubt maybe everything he says. Or maybe all of it is true, you just never know. So just to let you know, I'm taking everything at face value. Another interesting memory Rudyard relates is how he joined a quiz club in his high school, and Rudyard was somehow so smart and so compelling that he made all the kids in the quiz club worship the Hyborian god Crom, which is this fictional deity from Conan the Barbarian. And as you're about to see, that little detail is gonna come back full circle too. Another story which I found relatable was his first exposure to books. His mother took Rudyard to a second-hand bookshop in Philadelphia once, and it became an addiction for him. So he kept going back to this second-hand bookshop and kept buying $4 books and educated himself. And that's how his interest in history really began to develop. And I can really relate to that too. I can argue that the library in my high school made me the person I am today. Long story short, I was very lucky. I went to a high school which basically offered an American curriculum in Turkey, and it saved my life. You know, if it had not been for that place, I would have ended up parochial and limited and stunted and trapped in the malignant and futile intellectual landscape of Turkey. Hey, but thanks to that library, I developed a habit of reading in the English language. I found out about science fiction, natural history, science and biography reading, all in English, and here I am talking to you now. Anyway, so that's how Rudyard explains his love of reading, and he makes some ridiculous claims too. He says he reads thousands of pages in a month or something. He basically gives numbers that are impossible when examined closely, and other people commenting on Rudyard's biography have really harped on this detail and called him a liar, which is technically true, but in practice this guy obviously loves to exaggerate, and you know, like all best storytellers, he seems to mix equal parts of truth with fabrication. But yeah, this mixture is gonna bubble up spectacularly. So listen on. You know, so far it seems very normal. You know, maybe a human face on a slightly sociopathic YouTube character, but you haven't seen anything yet. Because there is a darker side to Rudyard's life. He tells about lots of family fights and a troubled mother who really seems psychotic. We see that this mother was a rabid leftist, but also later became a white nationalist. So almost all of Rudyard's natural enemies in the political YouTube ecosystem seem to be embodied by this awful mother figure. He also tells us that she tortures animals and was an overall reprehensible, controlling, and mentally disturbed person to be around. He tells how the mother alienated the sister from the dad, who is always cast as the good guy, but there are some weird things about the father figure too. We learn that he was extremely skimpy on money, to the degree that he ate tuna fish instead of chicken because it was 2 cents cheaper, and got mercury poisoning when he quote-unquote inseminated Rudyard. Well, obviously he tried to mean conceived me, but this guy gets words mixed up sometimes in a hilarious and sometimes Freudian way. You can also see that in his history videos where he has these massive walls of text, and there are always spelling errors in those. But yeah, back to his family affairs. Now, the father was an eccentric figure, something of a recluse, and Rudyard says that the father was such a recluse that he kind of was an outcast in the community, and the community quote-unquote blamed him for dealing drugs, which he swears he didn't do. So it's a bit of a murky story. It looks to me, if we take this at face value, it looks to me like both parties were really disturbed. Maybe the father was somehow mixed up with some slightly illegal stuff, but you got people like that in America. I mean, you have people who kind of value their own independence too much, perhaps at the detriment of society, but towards their family members they're affable and quirky and likable. But Rudyard also says that the sister was brainwashed by their mother to hate the dad. So I think the dad was not a lovable eccentric, but he also had a dark side, it seems. We later see this when Rudyard finds a cult. We will get there. He establishes a cult, and the way he acts towards prospective members of that cult, if there are any, is extremely paternal. He says, "Give me your boys," to whoever who is crazy enough to attend this organization. He says, give me your boys and I will make men out of them. I will train them. I will support them and I will show them how life works, and good luck there. I will show them how life works and I will ensure that they will have progeny and your bloodline survives or something like that. But that's coming up later. Let's go back to Rudyard's family. The mother and father really turn against each other and become mortal enemies. And it seems to me that he's genuine about his mother being an evil person. In contemporary society, yes, there are lots of evil men who are violent, who kill people, who ruin lives, who are selfish, everything. But remember, mothers can be extremely manipulative and abusive, even physically sometimes too, as we will later see. Look, family life is stressful in the best of times, and all over the world, in a lot of cases, it's just downright awful, because doesn't matter if it's man or woman, people will abuse each other if given the chance. That's just my experience in life. And it's a very rare marriage that does not fall into this power struggle one way or the other. But of course, our friend Rudyard here had it really worse than the most, as we are about to see. Anyways, he talks about these family problems and his parents' divorce. His evil mom ends up taking Rudyard's custody and he suffers under her misrule until he's 18. Then he goes to walk the Appalachian Trail and becomes a free individual, a sovereign citizen maybe, at the age of 18, and then begins to travel the world around the same time his YouTube channel takes off. He's got some interesting anecdotes there with a friend named Marek, who is his best friend and confidant. This Marek person, I don't know if he's even real, but Rudyard paints him in a similar way to a Mr. Watson to his Sherlock. And dare I say, maybe he was like a bon plant to Rudyard's Alexander von Humboldt. Look, if you know, you know. Well, maybe I should just tell you, look, Alexander von Humboldt is one of the establishing greatest naturalists of all time. He was one of the first people to pioneer the study of nature in a holistic way. That is to say, he would go to a place and would study botany, but also geology, and also record the customs of the people, and also make notes about the animals that lived there. And he even added his own personal experiences to the narrative, making notes about how he felt to be in a certain place. And he has a great book called The Personal Narrative. If you expand it, the actual title is A Personal Narrative of Travels to the Equinoctial Regions of the New Continent during the years 1799 and 1804. And yeah, it's a great book. A bit difficult to get through, but I really recommend reading that. Anyways, that's a tangent. I'm talking about Alexander von Humboldt because, like Rudyard, he suffered under the misrule of a domineering mother. And as soon as that mother was dead, Humboldt went out, explored what is now Colombia, and redefined the natural sciences. Unlike Humboldt, Rudyard went to the Appalachian Trail, got giardia, and then mucked around with psychedelics, and looks like he suffered a really traumatic experience. Now, before delving into that, let me clarify the Humboldt connection a bit more. Remember back there I talked about this Marek guy being the bon plant to Rudyard's von Humboldt. So this guy, Jaime Bonpland, was a French botanist of also major importance, and he was like von Humboldt's best buddy during the trip to South America. And if you kind of scrutinize the biographies of these two characters, you kind of learn that maybe he was just more than just friends, you know, a kind of Alexandrian romance between these two men may have been present. We don't know. But if you look at the way Rudyard describes this Marek character, he takes care of his videos, he edits them, he acts as his manager, and when they travel overseas, he says he depended on Marek for everything, and it seems to be a really close brotherhood between these two guys. To such a length that when Rudyard goes to somewhere in South America and does an ayahuasca trip, for the record, ayahuasca is this extremely psychoactive plant/traditional recipe practiced mostly in Ecuador by shamans, and it has become fashionable as of late for rich Americans and Europeans to go there and do an ayahuasca trip and kind of get to know themselves. And this thing is really potent. It seems to rewire the brain and cause intense hallucinations. You think you speak with God, but yeah, it's not something I would recommend or even wish upon my worst enemy. Well, when Rudyard does ayahuasca and is recovering from it, Marek is there to take care of him. And that's just a loving touch of affection, you know. Maybe it's a really close brotherhood, or maybe it's something more intimate, we don't know. But yeah, he should thank this guy if he's real, because as we are about to see, things will now take a really dark and then weird and then megalomaniac twist. And it's not impossible that everything you listen to may have been a fabrication. Maybe this Marek guy doesn't even exist. Or maybe he does exist, but is just Rudyard's YouTube employee, and the part about him being in his travels is fabricated. Maybe Rudyard did not even go to Ecuador and do ayahuasca. You can never know. Although it's a slim possibility, we can never rule out that maybe all of this 10-hour video was based on lies. Or maybe it had a few brass tacks like Rudyard's family, maybe his father, his grandfather, because some things check out. I mean, you can find the book that his eccentric Catholic extremist grandfather wrote, for example. And his father does exist, at least with that name. He has a Twitter account. All of these things check out. But maybe these were the few brass tacks that he wrapped the whole of his story around. But personally, I don't think he's lying. I think maybe 70% of that 10-hour narrative is true. The remaining 20% is based on hallucinations, and the remaining 10% is, exaggeration and embellishment. Yeah, but let's go back now. So Rudyard does his ayahuasca trip. I think when he's doing that, he's on other psychiatric medication too, because it ends up being a really bad trip. And in his own words, Rudyard, equipped with what he calls a photographic memory, has over 200 hours of discussions and debates and YouTube arguments with God, spirits, and the devil himself. Then Rudy has a special session with Satan where he is tormented for something like a time bubble of eternity. So he suffers for lifetimes while only a few days pass in his ayahuasca recovery. And then he has these intense discussions once more with God, the devil, Mother Nature, and other spirits. Now, at this point, we must start building up a register of entities that Rudyard claims to encounter in these psychedelic visions, because they will matter, believe me. I've always been interested in the similarity between such schizoid accounts and alien abduction experiences. They really kind of have the same vibe, same diseased, hallucinatory vibe. One moment you're looking at an alien, the next the alien is being replaced by an owl, but it's an implanted memory, and you only discover that later when you're under hypnosis or in therapy somehow, and this point is gonna rhyme too. It's a distinct similarity between Rudyard's narrative and alien abduction stories. So although Rudyard says he met lots of spirits, he doesn't give clear descriptions of any save two. One of them is Satan, and not much is said about him except that we know he's the devil somehow. But it seems like a lot of the entities Rudyard encounters could be considered to be demons if you look at them from the right framework. Then Rudyard encounters God, which he describes as looking like a Gen Z frat bro kind of character. And in this, I was reminded of the character of Adam in the animated series Hazbin Hotel. He says that God spoke to me like a frat bro saying skibidi riz or something. And then in this encounter, God told him to find a religion. And he said, "Why, God?" And God said, "Well, your bloodline agreed to it before you, so you must go ahead and do it." So yeah, this is what happens with ayahuasca. You suffer in hell and then frat bro God gives you a mission. But yeah, we could laugh more about this, but then Rudyard encounters something really traumatic about his past. And there's no delaying or sugarcoating or glossing this over. He says quite bluntly that he was raped by his mother, who was already known to be an abusive character, but it's really shocking and sad to imagine that this may have happened. I mean, it's not uncommon for mentally unbalanced women to sexually assault children. And Rudyard goes into detail about this too. He says that his mother sexually abused him, she raped him, and then she forced him to rape his sister. And then there was a babysitter present, and it looks like she forced him to do the deed with her too. It's all very dark and grim and sordid. And look, it may have been possible to just gloss this over if this was just a wayward tweet, if he said, "I was abused by my mom," and nobody would have believed this. But remember the context of the delivery. This information is given to us in a trilogy of incredibly weird videos spanning over 10 hours. And remember, right off the bat, Rudyard names his parents. So he doxes his family, which is a big no-no in the internet world. Even if you're up to nothing bad, you generally don't want people to know your in real life relatives or address. But now he's made this claim and he's named his mother and he's named his sister, and this is going to be a big burden on their lives too. And at the time of recording, the internet is divided to two camps about whether this thing really happened or not. Not that it's really worth thinking much over because it's really dark. But there's this little detail in Rudyard's storytelling which makes me suspect it somehow. So look, when he's talking about what his mother did to him, Rudyard kind of goes into a weird trance-like state. On camera, you can see his eyes get weird and his voice gets weird, and he said, "Oh, mommy, please don't do it, mommy. You're not my real mommy. You're my demon mommy." But he says this in a kind of very weird and childish voice, which he did not use before in any of his videos. It really feels like he snaps into character or relives a trauma or something. Now, there are two ways to interpret this. One, maybe he really is reliving his trauma. But when you consider that this is a YouTube video that he or maybe other people had an opportunity to edit and look over, you kind of doubt things a little. And the ease with which Rudyard slips into this weird, slightly demonic child voice is a bit suspect too. It looks like this is an effect he can turn on and off at will, like an evil flashlight. And personally, my verdict is thus. I think his mother was really abusive. Maybe beat him up, and maybe was like a really horrible person to be around. I can buy that. I don't think the rape story is real though. But Rudyard hated his mother so much that now, with the fame of more than 700,000 followers behind him, he's found a perfect axe swing to her neck, and he will tarnish her name. Now she will be forever known as a potential rapist. Doesn't matter if these allegations are true or not. Her name has been tarnished forever. And that's like the ultimate nuclear revenge, but also like nuclear warfare. It's a game in which there are no winners. So my personal view once again is that based on the weird play acting, traumatized demon child voice Rudyard puts up, I think he's putting on an act. Maybe it's coming from a righteous place. Maybe he was really abused by this parent, not sexually. So he wants to get back at her, and that's my canonic view of this really dark and horrible and hideous event that Rudyard relates. Remember, it's the delivery that makes this difference. In the internet today, rape claims are a dime a dozen. But this thing, first it comes from a relatively big YouTuber who was already an eccentric and interesting person. Then you start listening to these podcasts, these videos, and they're hours long, and they begin innocently enough. This kid talks about his life as a child. Actually, I was working on a project when these videos began dropping on the internet. I downloaded the transcripts, and using ChatGPT, I was editing them into a memoir kind of book with, actual formatting, a story you could read. And the result was really an interesting book to read until you got to the sexual assault bits. Then I stopped this project and put it away because I think obviously there's an attention motive here, and I wouldn't want to touch these claims with a 10-foot pole, so to speak. I mean, it's a really weird thing to see, because you listen to these people, you establish a parasocial relationship with them, and it doesn't have to be a good relationship. I was always listening to this WhatIfAltHist's channel, and in my head I was admonishing him like a big brother, saying like, oh, this is wrong, here's a better way to look at history. But then he comes up with this bomb. What to do about this? I think Rudyard is very self-aware in that respect, and I think he's using these parasocial connections really well here, because later on in the videos he will say things like, oh, now you know me, now I gave you my darkest secrets, so now you have to join my religion, and we will get there. And yeah, so it's really dark and there's no two ways about it. Anyways, after this ayahuasca experience, some rich, right-leaning tech bro types call up Rudyard, and he goes to Los Angeles, but not before taking a little jaunt in Egypt with his trusted pal and companion, Marek. And now, this sounds like a Konstantin Cavafy poem. Here you have this guy, this poor, weird boy who was sexually abused as a child, and he comes to that realization after a drug trip, and then with his trusted companion he goes to chaotic, dusty and sultry Egypt, where, I kid you not, they shop for artisanal handbags and stuff. And what happened in Egypt? Maybe he found love in a secret way he could never confess, not even to himself. But I would not be surprised if this sort of transformation came along in the next step of the protean and traumatic journey of Rudyard Lynch. Anyways, then they go back to Los Angeles, and here the story takes up a new turn. Oh, God, I've been talking for nearly an hour now, and I hope you're not bored, because we're only halfway through this incredible narrative. Okay, so Rudyard goes to Los Angeles, invited there by a group of tech CEO / conservative bro type, probably insufferable people, and it is inferred that he makes some wrong life choices there. If you read between the lines, you can kinda understand that he does a lot of drugs as he parties. He tries to find a girlfriend, but he cannot engage with women as human beings. He arrogantly says that if a girl is not more interesting than the heavy metal music I'm listening to, she's not worth it. Or like, he has this grading system. He calls girls by numbers. He says like, oh, in this club all the girls were 7s and stuff like that. And look, if you look at life that way, you will fail. You will fail if you want a steady relationship. You will fail if you want to be a player. That's not even the way to be a player. If you treat people without pretension, and if you just do your own thing, man, you could have anything, You're in Los Angeles, and as the great American philosopher Fred Durst says, So many, it's hard to choose. Take your pick, they all bad news. Got game, they all want you. Got shame, they always do. She can pick you up, she can bring you down. She's got all your dreams locked inside this town. There's no way to leave. Once you've had your ride, just be glad to know that you're still alive. You want girls that crawl, you can have it all. Anything you want, it's a monster's ball. You won't have to beg, they jump in your bed. Better check your head or you'll be late for that Los Angeles. Yeah, but he really lives through the ringer of Los Angeles, you know. He gets his heart broken, he does a lot of drugs, he parties a lot, he engages in a lot of meaningless relationships. You know, in these claims always divide the number by 3, but yeah, he parties a little and then he basically sees Los Angeles as the ultimate, decadent, dead-end, extreme culmination of Western civilization. And then he uses this motif in his life story as this kind of prophet who gets immersed in the realm of darkness before being reborn kind of motif. You know, a lot of legends and myths and religions have that motif. In order to ascend, you must first descend, you know. You gotta hit the bottom so that you can push up. And when you realize how Rudyard's mind operates, this is very easy to see what he's doing with the Los Angeles arc. I don't claim that his experiences weren't real or his heartbreak was not painful, but you can kinda see what he's doing with this. Anyways, he also reveals once again between the lines that he's got strong alcohol, substance abuse and drug problems. He probably has a spending habit he can't control too. He kind of feels like a low impulse control kind of person. At least in this stage of his life. Because later on, he complains about not being able to make enough money from YouTube, where if you calculate things right, you realize that at least during the good times of his channel, he must have actually earned quite a lot. But yeah, he just seems to have low impulse control and he spends this somehow. So it's another dead end. Plus the bros that brought him over to Los Angeles, they were kind of forming a social club for, I don't know, inquisitive and entrepreneurial young men, but that was just an excuse to party with hookers all the time, I guess. Get that out of their system. But yeah, this group falls apart and each fragment of the group goes on to establish an even shittier kind of business/social group. I guess these people cannot conceive of friend groups outside the conceptual straitjacket of a business or a club or a pay-to-enter kind of gathering. But Rudyard says one of the group goes on to find this activity group where, believe it or not, they spin a fucking wheel and they do whatever the wheel tells them to. This really stayed with me. It's a very, very minor detail in this big story, but like, imagine the kind of people who pay money to attend that club. Imagine how, I mean, look, Rudyard might be crazy now, but he's not wrong when he says that there's a kind of mental health and loneliness epidemic out there. Another guy sets up this, and I'm quoting, vacation group to Colombia and Ecuador for people in tech. God, you know, I don't condone violence in this channel, but I hope they all die where they go. I mean, look, people in tech, activity group, vacation group, they're just going out there and partying with hookers. I hope they suffer or they get passport bagged by some enterprising Colombian and Ecuadorian woman. Anyways, Rudyard tries to get one more relationship off the ground by hooking up with a quote-unquote Instagram model and has his heart broken again when she leaves for a guy who's a multi-millionaire. Surprise, Rudyard, she was in it for the money all along. As Fred Durst just says, gold digging comes with the scene. Anyways, it's an even sadder note. Also, Rudyard develops addiction issues and goes through withdrawal, and I don't know what he's addicted to, but he really has an awful time. You know, we've been joking about this guy, but in the meantime, when all of this was happening, he was actually becoming really popular and forming some really strong connections. I mean, these are the kind of people that America is built upon, so it's no surprise. So he gets a call from somebody named Dave Hamilton, who he says runs a think tank that puts on conferences for the military and politicians. So this guy invites Rudyard to Texas. He goes once, then he goes again, then he falls in love with the place. And then he decides to move to Texas. In the video, he actually makes a pledge to the hypothetical residents of Texas who might be listening to this. He says, "You have my sword and honor as a Pennsylvanian. From now on, I will serve the great state of Texas," or words to that effect. And this reminded me of that scene in the Lord of the Rings movie where everybody pledges to join the quest and they say, "You have my sword." And Rudyard says, "You have my mystical powers." Because it's just about to get very dark and mystical for Rudyard here in Texas. Upon settling in the state, he kind of goes through an intense PTSD. Once again, there's a long segment in the videos he posted about how he wanted to kill his mother and gouge her eyes out. And he says, "Rudyard, you have the knife now," or something like that. He starts speaking to himself at this stage in the videos. He goes on to another rant about how he is struggling in his YouTube channel despite being one of the most successful people he himself knows, and complains a little, and I guess he's in a really dark place. With his trusted friend and confidant and maybe secret lover Marek, he goes on to one more venture, this time to Harvard University, where he comments about how out of touch with reality Harvard and Ivy League people are in general. And despite coming across as extremely whiny and arrogant, there's a little grain of truth in there, just a little. I think you'd be statistically more likely to find completely out of touch assholes in an Ivy League college these days. But I don't think it's because of the liberal woke indoctrination. It's just because Harvard is a place where elites send their kids, and when you're rich, you can afford to be out of touch with reality. Anyways, there's nothing much more interesting beyond that there, except for the constant presence of this Marek character. Now, Mr. Marek, in the unlikely chance that you are listening, please get in touch with me and I would love to interview you on this channel about your amazing adventures with Rudyard here. Rudyard says he found Marek when he was working a shitty cashier job, as if that's an insult, and he kind of rescued him from that life and he made him the editor of his channel. And they had so many adventures together, like Alexander and Hephaestion. They had this ayahuasca trip, they traveled around the world, they went to this Harvard adventure, and then Rudyard made Marek move to Texas with him. Amazing stuff. I mean, look, if I was given an unlimited amount of money and asked to make this entire awful, weird catastrophe of a story into a film, I would make it from the point of view of Marek. I might be wrong, but I understand Marek is a first-generation American, or maybe he just moved to America after he was born. So it would be an incredible outsider's perspective of the wild excess and almost satanic despair that infects the minds of people on the United States. Imagine how weird and entitled some of the things which Rudyard does must seem to Marek. Marek is a Polish name. Imagine he was born in Poland, he came to the US, and there's this sort of privileged kid taking you around the world, providing for you, but also giving you a lot of trouble. It's almost like a marriage. This might be the closest Rudyard might come to married life, but he won't realize it because, oh my god. Look, Rudyard, in case you're listening, you gotta treat this Marek guy right. You know, give him a big raise, buy him a house, buy him a car, get him set up for life. Because not many people do that sort of thing for other people. You can't buy companions like that. You were lucky with this one. Just saying, man. Just saying. Anyways, after this, we enter the weirdest and darkest arc of the entire series, and now I'm gonna accelerate my pace of summarizing this thing because Rudyard frankly starts rambling at this point. He works himself into a frenzy, talking about how he's found peace with God and accepting Christ. He also refers to the Abrahamic God as Yahweh, and he says you don't fuck with Yahweh because, you know, he's got a solution and we're living in the end times, and and he just rambles on and on and on. In between, he drops these bombshell details about his life. He mentions he's addicted to kratom, which is an opioid-like plant-based drug from Southeast Asia that's gaining popularity in the United States. Its side effects may include, I'm reading, a decreased appetite, erectile dysfunction, insomnia, sweating, hyperpigmentation, constipation, tachycardia, and it's just not worth it, man, not worth it. Rudyard says he's addicted to kratom, but like every addict, he says, oh, but he can manage it. You know, I can stop it if I want to. Plus, it's better than other drugs anyways. You know, that's just addict logic 101 right there for you. Look, be careful with any sorts of drugs, seriously, even legal ones. I've seen them destroy lives. That's all I'll say. And Rudyard even goes to chug a big mug of kratom on camera. Now, this drug isn't illegal yet, but that's a ballsy move, and that's something which I darkly admire in this whole fucked up narrative of his, you know? He even says, so I'm chugging kratom, what about it, huh? Get the fuck out of here, or something. Like, he gets angry at himself, but you could have just cut it out of the video, man. He doxes his parents from the get-go. He consumes drugs on camera. By the way, the mug he uses to drink the kratom is like an octopus-shaped enormous mug, the size of, I don't know, a toddler's head or something. And it's a disgusting object. I see that shit on camera, I want to gag. It's straight out of this dusty head shop. God, have some class. What are you doing? You may be an addict, at least drink it from like a proper jug or something. Or maybe don't even talk about it, huh? How's that? But yeah, chugging his jug of kratom, Rudyard tells us about a lot of things, including how he's in touch with the spirit world, and he quotes the Gateway experiments performed by the CIA, and for posterity, the Gateway program was a real program set up by the CIA to investigate paranormal events and remote viewing. They did a lot of experiments and they tried to see if remote viewing could be achieved to spy on the Soviets. And the government at the time was also worried about the Soviets having a remote viewing program of their own. So it was like a psionic arms race in a way. Now, this Gateway program created some really useful techniques for meditation, but it could not obtain any good results that we know of. They could not conclusively prove that these people were looking at anything except from the insides of their own minds. Maybe the program did have some marginal success in developing better relaxation or interrogation techniques, or maybe more useful mental exercises for agents to prepare to lie and to put on personas. But yeah, as far as we know, nothing useful came out of the Gateway program. Now, the conspiracists among you might say, oh no, actually it was successful, but they covered it up. And to this day, the US government communicates with demons and spirits, and the said demons may even be influencing our affairs on this planet. I don't know what to say to such claims, but Rudyard at least seems to believe in those things. He says that he is in touch with the spirits of Hermes Trismegistus, who's a really popular figure among the mystical or the occult enthusiasts these days. But basically, there's no reason to believe that Hermes Trismegistus was even a real person. He seems to be a syncretic figure derived from the ancient Greek god Hermes and the Near Eastern or Egyptian god Thoth, a very obscure figure that can be pulled in a number of different directions. As far as Rudyard is concerned, Hermes Trismegistus is the same thing as Odin, and he's a sort of angel. He can be your devil or your angel. Actually, Rudyard channels this spirit for a while and says, I am another name for Lord Hermes Trismegistus. Rudyard serves me and he will be operating under my protection. Yahweh also owns him, but Yahweh also owns a lot of people. And I spoke with Yahweh and he's fine with letting me play with Rudyard right now. This is the level of insanity you see with this guy. He thinks he can talk to Odin, and at one point he becomes a mouthpiece for these gods. It's just incredible. The crescendo of his mania comes when Rudyard talks about a deal he sealed in a place called the Blue Room. And I just want you to look at this as if you were looking at an alien abduction claim, because some details are really similar. Rudyard says he really loves the color blue. You can see that in the logo of his channel actually. It's a blue ship with a very particular shade of navy blue. Anyway, somehow he wakes up in a blue room, and in the middle of that room is a figure with a blue cloak. He cannot see its face, but he speaks in a rustling, rasping voice. And he tells Rudyard he is Odin. Now that's very strange and a little scary. In fact, another commenter on this shitstorm of videos, she's a Christian conservative, and she, like many other people, reviews this video. She goes beat by beat, responding to Rudyard's sound bites. And whenever Rudyard says, oh, I've been speaking to Odin, or I've been speaking to Hermes Trismegistus, or I've been speaking to angels, the conservative lady interrupts the video and says, you weren't talking to angels, son. You were talking to demons. Actual demons. Now, if you believe in this framework, that's actually scarily consistent. You can make an argument saying that this guy is really being possessed by demons or is being led astray by the demons, which probably emerged from Crotom or the ayahuasca session, or maybe from the abuse at the hands of Rudyard's mother. We'll never know. I personally don't think these are demons. Even if I was inclined to believe in demons, I personally think this is a very, very, very elaborate bid for attention, maybe an even desperate one, for the reasons we are about to see. But now let's go back to the entity encounter in the Blue Room. Once again, if you read UFO abduction accounts, it's eerily similar. There's a scary but inconsistent mentor figure which explains Rudyard what to do next. And what follows is a torrent of psychotic outbursts that are so awful and so weird that I won't even bother summarizing them. You're better off just going to Rudyard's original videos in the archive link, which is in the video description, and listening for yourself. I will just try to make sense of what this guy is trying to say. So Odin takes Rudyard to the Blue Room, but Rudyard remember, he's a Christian conservative. He believes in Yahweh. In fact, numerous times he says, you don't fuck around with Yahweh, he will mess your shit up, or something like that. And he squares this circle by arguing that Odin and Hermes Trismegistus or whatever other spirits he's talking to are still legitimate, and he can still be in contact with them and also be a righteous Christian because they are at the level of angels. At least that's his internal logic. And he combines these elements. He takes the mysticism from Hermes Trismegistus, he takes the Aryan white person ethos from Odin, I guess. He takes compassion and, I guess, a sense of resilience from Christ, and he combines them in a new religion which he claims to be the prophet of. The way this is delivered is through two different types of monologues. In one type, he says that God is working through him, and in the second type, he actually talks as the mouthpiece of the God, and that's the most disturbing thing to listen to. But he basically says the world is going to end and a horrible disaster is coming, maybe like that civil war he predicted when he was LARPing as a historian, which never happened in America and never will. But anyways, he says a terrible cataclysm is coming. It could be war, it could be the end of days, nobody knows. The only way to combat this is by combining rational science, skepticism, and Darwinism with a belief in Christianity, Odin, and Hermetic mystical tradition, whatever these things are. I mean, long story short, you can see that he's trying to codify in a mystical way all of that Western civilization stuff that young right-wing people these days, the statue profile picture crowd is excited about. He's trying to codify them in a kind of mystical way and integrate that onto a new religion that doesn't displace the old style of Christianity, rather like Islam, which accepts prophets from the Old and New Testaments, but adds Muhammad as the last in their line. It's a very similar strategy. So despite all his manic pretensions, I think he's being very smart here. He's just trying to come up with a 2.0 update to Christianity, which will also encompass rational Western Enlightenment values and pre-Christian pagan European or white people or Greek or Roman values. He's trying to bring them all together. He's a very canny customer, this Rudyard. So this way he establishes his protagonist, and then against it he props up an antagonist, which is another composite. When he's talking about this adversary, Rudyard really likes to use the phrase, "I've killed your god," or "I'm the god killer." It's almost like Luke Skywalker, but instead we have Rudyard, God killer. This enemy is made up of several things. One of them is this sort of stereotypical left-wing, liberal, wokeist death drive, which Rudyard claims is responsible for the West's own suicide. The other part comes from the quote-unquote feminized version of Christianity, which is okay with everything and is afraid to put its foot down. You can see Rudyard's own hatred of his parents' old Reagan-era sort of Christianity and conservatism, maybe, combined with his possible and great hatred of women. And he really goes off against this imagined enemy. He insults it, he spits and foams in the mouth, he acts like a prissy cunt, really. I mean, there's no better way to do this. He says, "If you insult me, I'll destroy you, I'll kill your god, I'll fucking... You can't fucking run a society." And when he's delivering these lines, he really has this insolent, almost demon-possessed sound. He sounds like the early stages of Linda Blair's possession in the movie The Exorcist. And I can understand why heartfelt Christian viewers can mistake this for a genuine case of demonic possession. Well, anyways, we've established the protagonists and the antagonists in Rudyard Lynch's new religious theology. Now, there's also the method of delivery. Now, Rudyard is a canny customer. He doesn't want to be God himself, and he doesn't even want to be the prophet. But remember, this was thrust onto him, maybe almost literally, as his mother violated him and abused him. This trauma earned him the right to seal this contract in the Blue Room with Odin, who is actually not the Norse god Odin, but an angel acting as the messenger for God. By sealing this contract, Rudyard has no choice but to obey the will of God. And he needs to serve God and Odin or all these composite deities. He needs to serve these gods to save his people. It's really fun to play this logic games and this sort of speculative evolution, theological mystery approach when you're dealing with schizoid weirdness like this. And when you examine Rudyard's religious mania, you actually notice that this guy is no maniac. He's probably really troubled and he's an addict, but he knows what he's doing. He wants to be the savior of his people who are WASP-aligned white Americans. And in order to do that, he's owning up every value, every figure, every political inclination shared by this new right. He's an ancient philosopher, but he is also a Norse god. He is Jesus, he is God, but he is also a skeptic and a historian. He's got them all coming together in his own person. And best of all, it's not like he's a megalomaniac. No, this was thrust upon him by his ancestors and by his parents as they sinned when they violated him. When they raped and abused him, he had no choice but to serve. So we got the protagonists, we got the antagonists, we got the ambassador figure. Now let's look at the mechanics. How is Rudyard gonna do this? How is he gonna serve God and bring about the salvation of white people? Well, that is explained in the Blue Room contract too. If you listen to his insane ramblings closely, Rudyard explains us how he's gonna do it. He's gonna set up a new institute, which is also a new religion if you wanna go there, named, and I shit you not, OCD. But this OCD is not obsessive compulsive disorder. This OCD stands for the Order of the Crimson Dragon. Wow, what a creative name. And the best thing about this Order of the Crimson Dragon is that it can function as a school, and if you really feel like it, you can also take it up as a religion. By the way, as a side note, even the name OCD opening up into the Order of the Crimson Dragon seems to be inspired by Elon Musk's funny, lousy, memeable acronym approach, as he proposed the creation of something called the DOGI, which actually stands for the Department of Government Efficiency. So Rudyard is very, very canny, everybody. He knows what to borrow and he knows how to style it and fashion it. But let's go back to the OCD schools now. Rudyard explains what he's gonna do there, and try not to laugh. And I'm paraphrasing from the top of my mind, okay? I've just spent nearly 10 hours spread over several days watching this, but here's basically what he says. We're setting up a series of independent sub-businesses built on strong unifying values like honor, freedom, and truth. By doing this, we can move smart, capable people from one topic to another, depending on what's needed. Essentially, we're generating human capital by identifying brilliant, cool individuals who can accomplish amazing things and then equipping them with skills and good values. I want to create as many businesses as possible. There's so much we can do. Smart people are versatile. They can handle a lot of different challenges. We could have teams studying theology. We could launch a dating service. Maybe we even create services to help small towns thrive. I'm not sure if these ideas will work. I'm just throwing them out there. Guy is just spitballing. He just wants to establish an organic relationship between himself and his disciples, and it looks like he's gonna go along a hybrid model, which is half corporate seed funding and half mystical mentorship. And he also says certain things along the lines of, give me your young boys and the OCD will make them strong, breedable young men who will be preferred by women, so your line will propagate and stuff like that. But beneath all those layers of insanity, it looks like he has a half-formed idea ready to go. And if you look at it in the terms of an advertiser, it's actually a great way to go about this, because this 10-hour insane video generated more publicity for Rudyard than anything he previously did. He's now forever known as the insane, rambling, mystical guy. And to support these 3 crazy videos, Rudyard also published the following messages on Twitter a little while later. Here is what he says. Hey everyone, I have to tell you folks something. I'm a quite advanced mystic and am capable of communicating with the spirit world. If you wonder why I know so much and am so successful at the age of 23, this is part of the reason. Does he really think he's too smart? I mean, does he really think he's the smartest thing on the planet? Anyway, I have a photographic memory and have used this to have hundreds of hours of communication with different spiritual forces, whether God, the devil, Mother Nature, Hermes Trismegistus, the Anima, and many, many more. Those were all demons. The demons are in the base, Rudyard. I have a pretty good map of the spirit world. The Lord God and the Tree of Life, which is the spirit of consciousness connected to you by blood through evolution, are forcing me against my own consent, running team here, to intervene in the game now. I really did not want to do this, but God forced my hand. I did this since I was concerned we'd all fucking die as a society if I don't, and I'm young enough, I'm invested. So basically a rehash of the same thing. This is why I think he's onto something here. If it was just an insane rambling video, that would be okay, and it's clear to see he's drunk or on drugs there, but he's also writing this thing up. So this all leads me to believe that there's some method to his madness. Anyways, going on, they're really worried about you, Rudyard says, talking about the spirits. They can see inside your souls and know you're all miserable. None of you get laid, have babies, or have any reason to live or connection to the divine. It causes them so much suffering they sent me to say everything is going to be fine and that I am here to be responsible for my people's survival and their soul. Guy thinks he's Moses here. And even now, I wish that God had chosen another. Acting as your foe on his behalf is the last thing that I wanted. This was my home. Da-dun. Those great songs from Prince of Egypt. Well, let's go back to the Prince of Pennsylvania here. I am here to explain how both the spirit and the material worlds work to you in this stressful junction in evolution. I serve God and the Tree of Life. I have 10 hours of video content I've just released explaining what really exactly happened to me, what I know of the world, and why modernity is all lies. It's a very well executed integrated ad campaign. 10 hours of video supported by this call to action. I mean, if he was an advertiser, he would be quite successful. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, where were we? My message can be integrated with any given world religion since I stand for freedom, so that we can all experience the spirit world on our own terms. You see, as I just told you, he's crafting an add-on 2.0 version to latch on to Abrahamic religions and exalt only himself. I've been there and I'll show you how. I am a man who stands for other man, and not woman, I guess. I stand so that men will not be treated as cattle. By who? Look, if you're worried about women treating you as cattle, the solution is simple. You don't need to interact with them. You don't need to try to date them or have kids with them. You can just go your own way, bro. Anyways, Rudyard goes on. The meaning of life is empathy, to listen to others and to understand them. At the same time, to take responsibility for your own actions, to be an adult. There's a lot of like, haha, pull yourself up from the bootstraps kind of stuff here. Take your own destiny and the path God wants for you. Okay, there's one more page of this. There's no irony or joke here. This is all my best attempt at truth. Look, I am an empiricist, where I just tell you what I read and what I hear from the divine. I challenge anyone to disprove me. I support civil debates to prove me wrong with those who would like to do so. God, if he hadn't deleted this and walked back on this whole strange exercise, I would have loved to have a conversation with him. Not even a debate, just sit down and talk with this guy. Anyways, if I'm wrong, I will immediately accept that. I only have 2 requests from you. Number 1, don't bother me or my people. Don't insult me. The second is that all debates must be based in logical first principles, no ideology, hysteria, and foolishness. He's basically saying, don't be so hard on me, Daddy Kozuman. And if he had taken up this debate, I would not. I would really ask him simple questions. Questions like, do you think history unfolds through chaos, or through the actions of individuals, or through the repercussions of geological phenomena? Just simple questions like this. I would not force arguments on anything, but just listen to what he has to say. Yeah, but I think we've listened enough and we're kind of unraveling this guy's core message. Anyways, now I'm continuing my reading of this text, which was posted after the videos. You may wonder who I am to say all this. I am Rudyard William Lynch. I'm a 23-year-old ethnic Briton from rural Pennsylvania who lives in Texas now. I've hiked the Appalachian Trail, run a club for influencers, yada 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 yada. I lived in a half a dozen states, countries, and worked with many different jobs. I read nearly 1,000 books so far in my life, and I can draw any country in any year of history from memory on the spot. Okay. I guess these are enough for us to believe in his divinity, but okay. I also run an organization called the Order of the Crimson Dragon, OCD. We are a human capital group which aims at making men as excellent as possible. We are here to take your son and make him as brave, handsome, smart, charming, skilled, and wealthy as possible. I want to help your 19-year-old son and take responsibility for him. And that's that. Very strange choice of words and phrases, but yeah, basically this was Rudyard's follow-up to those insane videos. And when this whole thing was uploaded, the videos, the messages and everything, the reaction from people was insane. Many people were saying he's finally lost it. Everybody was shocked about the rape allegations. Right-wingers were saying, shut this down, man, you're giving the enemy camp ammo to use against us. And remember, this guy was being paraded around on popular channels as some sort of whiz kid, right-wing historian, a sort of conservative intellectual in the making. And when these videos dropped, the mask fell off. Turns out the guy was insane. But as we've been proving for the past hour and a half, insane with a purpose. Remember once again that before this whole thing happened, Rudyard was getting into arguments with the fascistic side of the far right in America. And they were dissing him left and right, they were attacking him, they were calling him a Jew as if that was a bad thing, or a turncoat, or a damage to the cause. And it seems that this enormous, insane stunt was some sort of retaliatory action in Rudyard's crooked, convoluted mind. He thought that by doing something like this, he could maybe claw back some of the political power he was bleeding out. He really thought he had a chance of becoming a prophetic figure for the right, huh? And it's really interesting and paradoxical. On one hand, he can concoct these insane, convoluted plans to pretend to be insane and form a cult. But on the other hand, he was naive and, dare I say, stupid enough to believe that this would work. But then again, maybe the insanity was like a filter. By putting on this act, Rudyard made sure that only the most fervent true believers, only the people stupid enough to eat this thing up hook, line and sinker would join his cult. And maybe that way he wouldn't own all of the right wing, if that's even possible, but he would gather a close following, a small number of really devoted followers who would do anything he asked of them. Maybe like that Marek guy, if he's even real. So that's the story of Rudyard Lynch, the WhatIfAltHist guy, and my long-winded attempt to psychoanalyze him, and to get to the bottom of his madness. In the aftermath, of course, there was an insane reaction. Maybe his family reached out to him, or maybe his Silicon Valley handlers said, "Man, you gotta take this down," or some shit, and Rudyard removed everything and left with this note. I was really stupid here. I was trying to make something go as viral as possible for advertising reasons. So I said something as ridiculously over the top as possible as a way to harvest views for my video series and the group. I was playing some stupid word game about narrativization, where I'm technically not saying anything exactly wrong in that you can appoint yourself to serve the tree of life, which means you can say it by definition. Yeah, this is dense. I made a whole multi-hour segment at the end of the video, which was as ridiculous as possible to freak people out on purpose. Well, mission accomplished. I talked to a beaver puppet, made jokes about masturbating, and talked about the philosophy of magic. The point was to show to not take yourself seriously. It was all a lark, all a gimmick, all an innocent joke. I purposefully played with definitions in the video where I say psychic is a person capable of dealing with the realm of forms. So psychic, in quotes, is one form of intelligence among others that deals with empathic abilities. I'm gonna translate this sentence for you. He says, "Haha, I was just joking, bro. When I said psychic, I just meant someone who was sensitive." I basically controlled all the definitions to say this insane thing for clout to harvest for the videos. I'm sure you did, buddy. And you know what? It worked. It worked. It blew back, but it worked. I did this since it's a leftist tactic where they control words to get an outcome. Look, maybe there are some opportunistic people pretending to be leftists who do this, and I don't deny they exist, you know. There's assholes on both sides, but you weren't doing this to you weren't doing this to own the left. Basically, I was playing with the concept of what a social construct is. Instead, this just became a vessel of my own egomania, true words, masking under some thin veneer of a joke. I recently had a religious experience, which was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, which kind of drove me crazy. Are you talking about the Blue Room here? Was the religious experience with Odin, with the Christian God, or with another deity? Really curious there. I did recently have a beautiful experience with God, which inspired me to go back into politics. So I ramped up the insanity to 10. He can't even make the 11 joke right because he doesn't know what movie that is from. What I did here was an insult to God, but how I didn't see it earlier. I developed some weird rationalization when you were chugging drugs about how misusing God's name would allow me to psyop the public into believing God through showing the leftism's failures above. So let's try to rationalize this. He was pretending to be insane and insulting God because he kept saying, "I killed God, I killed your God, I killed the God of my mother," and stuff like that, because he wanted people to hate him and in reaction turn into actual fate. Okay, 4D chess player here. Anyways, looking back on this, I see some part of my shadow that I don't like. Let this be a lesson for you for what not to do. Can you please forgive me for being this stupid? I hope I have built up enough goodwill so you can let me be retarded. You know, if he just said the last two sentences, it would have been enough. Can you please forgive me for being this stupid? I hope I've built up enough goodwill so you can let me be retarded. Apology accepted, retard. But all the jokes aside, this guy is seriously disturbed. I don't think he was sexually molested by his mother, but I do believe that he had a really troubled childhood. He is obviously suffering under drugs, and he obviously still is unable to let go of his own megalomaniac perception of himself. When he does, I think Rudyard Lynch can do really interesting and genuinely beneficial things. If I was God and I could control people like I could control puppets, here is what I would make this guy do. I would come up with a really short apology. Nothing long, nothing about showing the leftism's failures or whatever. I would say, I was obsessed with myself. Sorry, I'll come back to my own programming soon. And then gravitate only towards history. Make history videos and filter the politics out of that. Because some of those videos weren't so bad. And if you still want to help people and empower them, he could write popular history or self-help books. Something like 10 lessons from military generals to help you in your personal life. Or, I don't know, like 40 lessons from the Roman Empire for happiness in life. Stuff like this. He could go actually research things, read actual books, and stop attacking enemies, real or imaginary. Stop grinding your axe and only have your thoughts to burnish. That way I think he can still be a nice person to hang around with. It's a long shot, but yeah, maybe in a decade or so he may whip himself into shape. I really hope he doesn't do anything stupid or kill himself, because in these videos and previously on Twitter, he showed all the weapons he owned, including some really cool medieval swords, an AR-15 and a handgun, among others. And it's really easy to imagine something snapping and this guy just going amok, maybe killing others, maybe killing his own family members, who knows? I think this is not the last we've heard of WhatIfAltHist or his breakdowns, and certainly he's still active, he's still producing content, he's trying to live this thing down, but I don't think he's gonna have mass media appearances anymore. He's forever consigned himself to the role of a niche eccentric now. But maybe that will be his salvation, through a smaller audience, maybe he can learn to do actual interesting stuff. One can hope. I'm also absolutely certain he's dealing with a lot of personal stuff and processing a lot of trauma and, trying to work on himself. And if you're listening to this, Rudyard, best of luck to you. If you want to be a guest here on the CM Cosman channel one day, the doors are always open to you, my friend. But also let's look at this entire 10-hour series of videos and this guy's career as a cultural artifact. There's a really nice horror film. It's called Halloween 3, The Season of the Witch. It comes after Halloween 1 and Halloween 2. What makes Halloween 3 special is how its story has nothing to do with the previous two movies. The previous two films are about a masked killer stalking Jamie Lee Curtis. Halloween 3 is about a company that is using parts of the Stonehenge combined with microchips and implanted into satanically magic-ridden dolls to turn kids into piles of worms, snakes, and bugs on Halloween Eve. I kid you not, that's the plot of the movie. And in the same way, Halloween 3 was a sequel to the first two films. I think Rudyard Lynch's 10-hour video insanity ramblings could be seen as a sequel to other great works of American nonfiction, such as A Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance, soon to be the Vice President of the United States. What I'm getting at is Rudyard is no exception. He's only a younger one and a Gen Z one. And people like this have always existed in American society. You could say that maybe somehow America really was a demon-haunted continent. There seems to be something in the American experience which drives people insane and violent with surprising regularity. Look at all the mass shootings, the homegrown terror attacks, and all the little things too, like this guy freaking out. Stuff like this has always happened in America. And they are not obscure outliers either. I mean, you got an entire religion called Mormonism, which was born out of something not quite different from Rudyard's plans to create this Order of the Crimson Dragon. I mean, the founder of the Mormon religion, better known as the Church of Latter-day Saints. You know, he was a treasure hunter. He had a first vision. It really didn't catch up, so he went to treasure hunting, and then he found golden plates, and then these disappeared, but he could read them with some special stones. It's insane. It's way crazier than anything WhatIfAltHist told in his 10-hour video. But the main structure is remarkably similar. You got a person who's clearly a sociopath. He keeps trying and trying and trying. He's got an enormous reserve of energy. By the way, don't get me wrong, this is not an insult to Mormons or members of the Latter-day Saints Church. You could look at any contemporary or near-modern American religious movement, including things like the Moonies or the Bhagwan cult founded by this Osho creep. They're all full of stories like this. An interesting thing you notice is that all of these start through the basest desires to acquire money, power, sex, or probably a combination of all of them, and then mature, and then the myth takes a life of its own and can actually be beneficial. I mean, this is exactly what happened with Mormonism. In the present day, Mormons are some of the hardest working, most earning, most reliable individuals you can find in America. But the way their religion got started was, dare I say, even less substantial than what we saw WhatIfAltHist do at the end of 2024. So this has always perplexed me, and that's why I took this time to do a deep dive into Rudyard's ramblings. I hope you enjoyed them too, and I am really curious to know what you think about all this. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, maybe you think I'm being too easy on Rudyard, huh? Maybe you think he's a real creep and a real sociopath, and I'm giving him the benefit of doubt. Or maybe you think I'm insulting him and I should be kinder. Who knows? Who knows? If you're listening, by the way, Rudyard Lynch, please drop on by. Once again, the doors are always open for an interview with you. Anyways, America, man, America is a really, really strange place, and we just collectively experienced another spasm of that strangeness last week, and that's that from me. I've been listening to this shit for 2 days straight, and I've been recording this for another whole day, so my mind is fried. As always, this has been CM Kozeman, and I love you all. Goodbye.